the fun. You curated a pretty amazing playlist for us to give us a good overview of the Berlin School stuff. And man, I can tell you, I am absolutely enamored with it. It's kind of that music that I always love those parts of like the Pink Floyd type sound where it's the ambient, long, drawn out compositions, even like the modern post rock type stuff. So this really speaks to me and that cinematic, kind of almost score to life type feel that the music's doing here, as well as the way they use the instruments on some of the stuff. One of the tracks later down the playlist, we'll talk about from Goching. He's doing some of the ideas from the music with guitars, and
Yeah.
the idea is to step outside of the box a little bit and give it that synth feel with guitar. So really, a ton of creativity going on here. I wonder if you want to introduce kind of the first section you set up for us.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, so yeah, I thought it'd be great for us to do like a little like listen and react. So the first section is going to be focused on Tangerine Dream. Um, they're the forebearers of the genre. And what I really wanted to highlight in like the first section is just like how far away from the Berlin School they started. So to jump in,
Yes.
let's start with a Tangerine Dream song from their very first album, Electronic Meditation. It's called "Journey Through a Burning Brain," and it's reflective of you know more of that kind of industrial cluster vibe. It kind of
Hmm.
harkens to some of the like the psychedelic music that's coming out of the UK at the time. Thinking uh, Pink Floyd, sort of like Sid Barrett era.
Right.
Um, yeah. So yeah, hit it. Let's play that one.
Yeah, so for those keeping track at home, it is a 12 and a half minute song, and just kind of wanted to give you a taste of the evolution of it. Definitely, like, yeah, it immediately conjures up those Sid Barrett, imageries, like the famous story of him taking way too many hits of LSD and just sitting on stage, strumming a C chord for like 29 minutes, one night.
Oh yeah.
Just let's make noise, let's have fun with it, and let's see where it goes. And no, yeah, it's amazing to think this is where they started to where they wind up like 2, 3 years later, let alone 20 years later.
Or even a year later. I mean, like, I feel like that the trio of that record is they don't like each other at all. Froza is just like trying to pull something together because he's got money from
Mm-hmm.
Kaiser, and they're all friends with uh, Konrad Schnitzler because he's running the Zodiac. And it's just like, all right, well, let's just throw something together. They recorded, wait, I think it's supposedly they recorded it in one take in a warehouse, and it's just
Wow.
like, they're like, and there's so many interviews with like Klaus Schultz where he talks about how much of a joker he thinks Schnitzler was, that he like showed up to the recording session with like a shelf full of like random like trash, that he was gonna like shake in front of microphones and stuff. Um, so, I mean, and I don't think it sounds that way. I think it sounds quite good, actually. I think
Yeah.
it definitely is like a ramshackle version of Sid Barrett era Pink Floyd. I don't think, I mean, and I would even say that like Schnitzler's cello and violin parts like make sense in context of the composition. Like it doesn't feel like whacked out or anything. I don't know how
No,
much of his like weird trash on the shelf got on the record. I mean, maybe not that much. Um, uh, but yeah, it's actually a pretty decent record. I know like Froza doesn't talk about it, you know, super positively in like later interviews, and obviously like they're a million miles away from that in the future.
right.
Um, but yeah,
It's kind of the
uh,
we were just dumb kids album, right there.
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah, and they were like
yeah,
Klaus Schultz at that time has got to be like maybe 19. I don't think he's even 20 yet.
yeah,
Um,
plenty of time to go then.
and then so the next track that we pulled up is from Alpha Centauri. It's called Ultima Thule Part One. Um, and this is going to show. So at this point, we've lost Schnitzler, we've lost Schultz. Kaiser is still throwing money at Edgar Froza and saying like, "Give me another record, man." He recruits Christopher Franke from Agitation Free, who at this time is still a drummer. He's not playing synth at this time. And then they've also got um, I think Steven Schroeder is actually on the record but uncredited, and then it's credited to Peter Baumann, who I don't think actually plays on the record.
Hmm.
Um, but this track in particular is like you can tell how much better Christopher Franke is as a drummer than Klaus Schultz. He's incredible on this. I mean, he's playing
Yeah,
like 180 BPM, just like crazy
he's tight.
drumming underneath it, and Schroeder, for all as wacky as he is, like as a person, and like some of the stories about him, the like flanged organ stuff on this track is
Mm.
incredible. Um, so yeah, let's give folks a taste of this one, Ultima Thule.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
so I mean,
one, I
like,
mean, you start getting the prog feel and, very solid musicianship as well as, still kind of the out there ideas.
yeah, which is awesome. I feel like this track is one of those things where it's like, I'm always like, why didn't they do more of that? Like Alpha Centauri as a record as the whole, like the first couple tracks are actually like pretty like down tempo, like honestly like a little bit more like the next record, Zeit. Um, it's just Ultima Thule that has Christoph Franco playing drums on it, um, and it goes into like that really cool freak out territory. It almost feels like they're kind of replying in that moment to the Ashra Temple stuff.
Mm.
Um, like it's very much more in the vein of like join in era Ashra Temple or yeah, I would say that era because the early on Klaus Schultz is still not that great of a drummer, and by
Right.
join in like he's kind of like dialed it in and he sounds good, and I think Christopher Franco was like he was always there, right? He was good in Agitation Free. He's good in in this like this iteration of Tangerine Dream.
Yeah, was he more of
Um,
like a formally trained musician or because he definitely seems
no,
to have
no,
pretty strong chops.
he was just you know German kid learning to play the drums. I think it's just like the Agitation Free kids. They were part of the Electronic Beat Studio, um, and they just like played relentlessly.
Mm.
Um, they were the kind of they were always jamming together, always playing. Actually, all the kids that came out of that are really strong players, and it's got to be that community of kids just like pushing each other forward kind of thing,
Yep.
because Goching has really great chops. Lul from Agitation Free has really good chops. Yeah, Christopher Frank obviously. Um, all the guys that came out of that, including to a certain extent, what's his name? Uh, uh, Michael Honig as well.
Mm.
Is actually a really good keyboard player. Um, so I think that it's just like that community of kids pushing each other forward and getting better. I mean, Klaus Schultz is part of that. I mean, he talks about going to the Beat Studio and stuff like that, but he wasn't part of like the Agitation Free crew.
Right.
So the next thing, and we don't have to listen to a clip of this one because honestly, it's probably like the most down tempo of the stuff. It's called on the playlist. So it's called "Birth of Liquid Pleiades." I guess I'm assuming that's how you say it.
I think that's
Um,
it. Yeah.
I've never heard Edgar say it, so um, this track is interesting because it's the first album where Christopher Franke decides he's not playing drums anymore. He's started to just transitioned over to synth, and this whole record is just like a drone album essentially.
Yeah.
Um, it's 20 minutes of drone. The other cool thing about this record is that um, Florian Frick of Popol Vuh is playing his gigantic Moog on this. Um, so is he doing anything like really groundbreaking? Not really. It's like a decent drone record, but nothing to write home about. But definitely like an interesting path for them, because you're especially if you're hearing Ultima Thule before this. If you're like a record buyer, 1970, you picked up Alpha Centauri, and you're like, oh my god, dude, this last track is amazing. I hope they do this for the next record.
Yeah.
And you pick this up, and you've heard Florian Frick is on it. You probably maybe you heard uh the first Popol Vuh record, and you're thinking like, okay, that was like just crazy whacked out sound effects. Like that's gonna be awesome in context of like that kind of Asherah Temple jamming kind of stuff. And then you get this record, you're probably a little let down. You're probably a little
Yeah.
like, what is this?
A bit
Um,
of a different energy, but I mean, it just goes to show like how diverse they were in their ideas and their music. I mean, quickly, you can go from that rock out to this meditative drone stuff, and then you never know what you're going to get with them.
True. I guess that's a cool part of it. Um, that you're getting introduced to all these kind of genres that maybe you wouldn't have gone to seek out. And I guess that's kind of the vibe in the 70s though too, right? Even
Right.
with like labels, the idea that like Popol Vuh, Asherah Temple, Tangerine Dream, they're all in the same record label. They're all signed by Kaiser, and they're all profoundly different
Hmm.
sounds. Um, even though like we've in 2025 have kind of grouped them all into krautrock. They all
One
kind of have their own
convenient
thing.
umbrella. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. So I would say if you're listening out there, check out the album Zeit by Tangerine Dream just to get a feel for that transition from like psych freak out stuff to the kind of middle period of droney stuff that they did. There's another record that comes after Zeit that's called Atem that is in the same style where they're continuing to do the droning stuff. But the real breakout record for them is Phaedra. And I talked earlier on the podcast about, um, the title track and some of the interesting stuff coming out of that. But what I want to play here is the track "Movements of a Visionary." This one, I think, even more so than the title track, kind of captures the Berlin School style. It is not hampered with the kind of technical issues that popped up for Phaedra, and I think I would say that the sequences on this are more musical,
Mm.
um, and I think it's a better standout track to me than Phaedra. Um, yeah, so let's throw on a little bit of that. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I love that
Now,
record. I love that track is awesome. Um,
now is that
it,
where Cosmiche kind of starts becoming like a defined sound? I mean, because for me, it definitely conjures up, the deep space satellites flying by the stars and all those things. Is that kind of where that label came in?
it isn't actually. It came in before. So, Cosmiche thing comes out of Kaiser's like marketing material.
Mm.
Um, so like the Cosmic Couriers label is where like Cosmish gets coined in context of the German scene, and it's actually like really controversial. If you see interviews with Klaus Schultz, even Manuel Göttsching, um, Michael Honig, they all disliked that label,
Mm.
um, because it was associated with Kaiser. They all hated him so much because
Yeah.
of what happened like at the later end of the label where he wasn't paying them out anymore. He was giving them really paltry advances. He's taking acid constantly, like not really following through on stuff. Um, but the first couple records out of like the krautrock German scene that get the Kosmish label are those first couple um, Cosmic Couriers records, like the Cosmic Jokers
Mm.
record, the Terror record, stuff like that. That's where the label comes from. Um, I think like this later stuff that has like the sequencing, um, maybe people were still calling it Cosmish. I'm not sure, um, but because even like the Berlin School coinage doesn't come until way later. It doesn't come until like '78
Gotcha.
or so. Um, so yeah, I don't know what people were calling this. Cool
I mean,
electronic music, I guess.
exactly, exactly. Groundbreaking, I think for sure. And yeah, I mean, just the interplay of all these things without all the traditional instruments, but it's still making this wonderful composition. Everything through computers and digital ideas, and I love this one.
Yeah, yeah, like the just like the idea that they didn't they didn't need the drums, and I guess like
Right.
that's what Franca's vision was like all along. Um, I don't know what he had access to. I know that like there's a lot of talk about him going to a studio in Hamburg where he eventually buys the Moog 3P that they use on this record on Phaedra, and having access to the sequencer there. Um, and I know that there's a funny story actually about Klaus Schultz going to Florian Frick's house when he goes to buy the Moog 3P from him in like 74 or 75. I think it's more like towards 75 because he doesn't end up using it on Moon Dawn. He uses it on the record after that, I think. Um, and Klaus Schultz knows that Florian got like the four piece setup. Um, I guess like there's a photo of it on one of the records, on one of the early Popol Vuh records, and he goes, he brings his like advance from Virgin or whatever. I think he pays him like 25,000 Deutschmarks or something, and he gives him like the three cases that are associated with like the oscillators and the envelopes and stuff like that. And Schultz is like, "No, dude, there's another case. Where's the sequencer case?" And Frick's like, "Oh yeah, there was a case, but it just made weird pulsing sounds. Are you sure you want that?" And Schultz is like, "Yeah, dude, it's the sequencer. Yeah, it's like a $10,000 thing. Yeah." So he like runs down into the basement and he's like, "Oh, yeah, here it is. Here's this thing," and like I think that's very. It's a telling story of one Frick feeling like, "Who needs a sequencer? I can play it," because he was such a
Right.
virtuoso. Um, and but also him not necessarily understanding like the possible like musical value of that, or maybe he just really felt like, if I'm gonna play something like repetitive like that, I can just play it to tape and then it doesn't matter. Um,
Right.
Whereas I think, Franca in visiting, it's the studio starts in H. I forget what it is, but I think in visiting that studio and messing around with that, like he really sees like the potential of it moving forward. He just doesn't have the money to bring it to the studio with with Dierks or anybody like that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a really solid rhythmic device as well. Not for somebody like the drums trying to transfer away from having to hit on stuff. Like that sequencer is going to keep everything in sync, lined up really well. And I mean, they do a good job of layering it in. So, there's still the conventional music parts of, there's our beat, there's our melodies, there's our leads, there's, kind of everything we need for a full song, but this completely new instrumentation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I think like his vision, even more so than Froza's, is really what kind of pushes them forward. Um, and then the next track we have on the playlist is part one from Ricochet. Um, and not sure if you guys can hear that plow coming down. We're in yeah, snowpocalypse over in Philly here. Um, but anyway, um, the so the reason I put this on the list is because it shows now. There are, I think now it's confirmed that like part one of Ricochet has a lot of overdubs on it.
Hmm.
Part two does not, but I think it's equally valuable in listening to. But the idea that like at this time, if you saw Tangerine Dream, they were so dialed in with the technology that they were able to improvise on the fly with the sequencers, with the oscillators, and nobody is doing this at this time. Like
Yeah.
nobody in 74, 75 is traveling, touring, playing with sequencers that have a lot of there's a lot of work that goes into tuning the oscillators, setting up all the sequencers so that they're like on the notes. Because keep in mind, like they're playing with a mellotron. So a mellotron has it's like a tape organ where each key is tied to an individual piece of tape that plays back like a violin sound or a flute sound,
Right.
and it's calibrated in such a way that like it's in A440. So when you crank up the synthesizer, if the synthesizer is a little bit out of tune, you can't solo on
Right.
your mellotron over the sequence.
It's gonna sound like
Um,
shit. Yeah.
yeah, so everything is like really dialed in, and it's not just like Franca taking 2 hours before every show to tune all the oscillators. He does, at one point he reaches out to um, a place in Berlin called Project Electronic that builds them a bunch of like kind of tools to really quickly transpose the sequencers for voltage, like going up an octave or down an octave, going up a third, going down a third, um, and stuff that he can use to like really quickly improvise on the fly with some of the technology that they had. Um, but that being said, they're so ahead of the curve on the technology side that like this Ricochet album, and knowing that it was a live album and knowing that they had improvised it would have been like a really cool thing at the time. Um, and I think like listening to it in that context really puts you in a headspace where it's like wow, um, these guys were really cutting edge, doing really cool stuff that nobody at this time is really accomplishing. Like even think about a band like Pink Floyd,
Yeah.
72, Dark Side comes out. They're using sequencers, right? So they're using On the Run. They've got an EMS synth sequencer, um, but they're not improvising over it, right?
No.
It's just the sequencer running. It's a lot of percussive sounds going over top of it, but nothing melodic. And
Right.
so to think that like even Pink Floyd wasn't really ready to start improvising over sequenced melodies at that time really shows you like how far they had gotten.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, I'm putting myself in that headspace of being up on stage, experimenting and like essentially jamming with these things, and it's terrifying. Like, I mean, this equipment is so cool and foreign in so many ways, but these guys, like, to what you said, totally masters of it, just dialed in. And I mean, the fact that they're showing up with this pretty, I don't know, new schizophrenic at times technology and accomplishing these things is just like astounding.
yeah, and I mean like if you want to like check out more detail on um, some of the harrowing experiences it can be like to tour with this kind of equipment. Edgar Froese's autobiography, it's called Force Majeure. It there's probably 3 or 4 chapters of like the worst possible things that could happen to them over time. Everything from uh, on their Australian tour, they the they hired a custom uh, like shipping group to ship all the synthesizers to Australia, knowing that it was going to be fraught with these kind of things.
Hmm.
They built custom cases to ship the things over that had like arrows on them saying like this side up and all this kind of stuff. Um, the main the main case with the power supply in it that has the transformer, which is like 30-40 pound transformer. Case was shipped upside down, even though it had arrows on the case, and the transformer fell through the entire case, smashing all the circuit boards on the way down. So
Oh,
they had to play like the first 4 dates of the Australian tour um, without the sequencer or really like the Moog at all. I think they managed to get some other synthesizers to play like live to it, and I think
Yeah.
Froze talks about having to go to like some radio station with like a multi-track of the Phaedra album, and he gets like them to overdub like the bass lines from a couple of the tracks, and they're using them as the sequence instead of playing it live on the Moog. Um, and they just like there's a lot of talk about them like trying to solder the circuit boards back together while they're on tour.
Jeez.
So like, they
But
didn't
still
really
sounds
run
like
into.
really clever. Yeah, I mean, even to think to go to the radio station and do that kind of thing.
Oh, true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I, that was I was when I was reading that, and I was like, oh my god, like, what are they gonna do? You know,
Right,
like,
right, right.
um, so yeah, super clever solution for sure. I mean, they were like a top 10 band at that time. I think Phaedra was like yeah top 10 on the Australian album charts. That's why they ended up doing the tour. Um,
And it was like
but yeah,
15
Ricochet.
in the UK as well, right? I mean, it landed pretty big.
Yeah, I think maybe top 12. I think it was number 12 or
Yeah.
something on the UK album charts. So yeah, really good for them. Um, so I think we're gonna switch gears here on the playlist and jump to some Klaus Schultz stuff. And I think we'll share the playlist with everybody at home. But the next 2 tracks are kind of like Klaus Schultz trying to pin down the same vibe as Tangerine Dream on Zeit and Atem. The first track is from his album Irrlicht. It's called Quadrophonisch Symphonie for orchestra, Satz Ebene, and basically it is. I mean, honestly, like this is. I think that Irrlicht is a better drone album than Zeit.
Mm.
Um, and it comes out like right at the same time. So I don't think at this point I don't think Klaus is necessarily deriving stuff from Tangerine Dream. I think he's just influenced by the same stuff. And
Yeah.
I would go so far to say that like the live cello and like orchestra stuff that Tangerine Dream's using on Zeit doesn't sound as good as like the tape manipulated stuff that Schultz is using on Irrlicht. I think the textures that he gets on Irrlicht are way more interesting than what Tangerine Dream comes up with at the same time. So I think like if you're into that kind of drone stuff, it's worth listening to some of these early Klaus Schultz records because he's using tape in a cool way that some of his contemporaries aren't for whatever
Yeah.
reason. Um, and then the next track um, is called Bayreuth Return. Um, and Bayreuth is I think a town in Germany, and it's I don't know, he's inspired by the town or whatever. That's why he writes this. This is Klaus Schultz's first true Berlin School album, and it's got all the touch points of the Tangerine Dream stuff. Now keep in mind he's done this, 2 years after Phaedra comes out. So Phaedra
Mm.
comes out in '74. Rubicon comes out in early '75. So 2 records have already come out before Klaus Schultz puts out Time Wind. Um, and I do think at this point he starts to become derivative.
Mhm.
Um, I think that he's heard Phaedra. I think he's heard Rubicon. He still can't afford the Moog. He ends up getting a digital sequencer that he ends up using in his home studio. And I really do think at this point he's kind of just ripping off his buds, Edgar and Christoph. Um, and I would even go so far to say that I think that um, this album isn't. And I'm gonna get panned by the Kraut heads out there. The Berlin School guys are gonna be like,
It's
"No,
okay.
Klaus Schultz is he's
We got your back.
a genius." Um, but I just think that he's not really doing anything like significantly different from. And I would even go so far as to say that his like use of melody and his melodic sensibility is really couched in the same kind of stuff that Tangerine Dream were doing at this time. I don't think you put on Phaedra next to Time Wind, and you'd think they're the same band.
Right.
I don't know what was your thought, Helio, when you were listening to it?
No, I mean, I really liked. I did love the Quadrophonisch Symphony for orchestra, I thought that one was really interesting. But yeah, Beirut Return. I mean, I it didn't stand out. Um, because I mean, to your point, it's very similar in style to what's going on with Tangerine Dream, and then having that time context now kind of gives it even more perspective of like, uh, it's good. You did the thing that everybody else is doing. Good for you, and it sounds unique. But it's yeah, it's not overly standing out to me.
Yeah, 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 and that's where I'm at too. Um, Now the standout track for me from Klaus Schultz is the next one, and that is called Crystal Lake. It's off of his album Mirage, um, and at this point, I feel like he really hits his stride. Like melodically, he's started to drift away from some of the melodic touch points that he's kind of, I feel like, is derivative um, of the earlier Tangerine Dream stuff. And honestly, like I feel like, and I haven't seen anything like the what's his name? He did The Fog, the movie The Fog, and he did Halloween. John
Uh, J-
Carpenter?
yeah, yep,
Yeah,
John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. I think John Carpenter is hearing some of this like Klaus Schultz stuff from like '77, and that's where he's getting some of his influence. I know in a lot of John Carpenter interviews he talks about Tangerine Dream, but like we're gonna listen to this track Crystal Lake, and like if it's not a dead ringer for the Halloween soundtrack, um, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly like better recorded than John Carpenter's, it has this kind of like crystalline sound that I feel like is so it's so clean sounding for this era. It almost sounds like it's an FM synth, but like the DX7 is still like 5 or 6 years away. Um, and yeah, both the melodic sensibility and the tones that he's getting are great. And I mean, like if you're into Tangerine Dream, if you're into Klaus Schultz and you haven't heard Mirage, I highly suggest this record. I feel like this is like probably the best out of his catalog. Um, so let's throw a little bit of that on.
All right. Now, what I have on here on our playlist is
Yeah, it's
is
the Crystal
referred to as
Returns from Live in
Crystal
Japan. You can
Returns.
play a
Yeah.
little bit of that, and we'll just overdub.
Awesome. Awesome.
But right, John Carpenter, he's right
Yeah,
there.
100%. I mean, listening to that one the first time, not having that thought, immediately it was like, this is total like late 70s, early 80s, like soundtrack music right here.
Oh yeah,
And there you go. Yeah, I mean, nail on the head with John Carpenter connection. Yeah, I like this though. It's a good mix of kind of like this dark tone to it, but also still finding like the beauty in some of these instruments and everything, and like those just pretty perfect chords. But then you have that really dark sequence going on behind it, or just it could put you a little on edge. I feel like.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, that's definitely my favorite Klaus Schultz track. And I mean, I w- I had thrown this up like earlier, just being like, do we feel like Klaus Schultz deserves his place in the krautrock canon, or is he just like a derivative of Tangerine Dream? Um, and
I
my feeling
think,
is like,
yeah,
yeah, by the Mirage period, I think he's earned his spot. Um, I think earlier on, and if he didn't really make it, if he didn't go past like Time Wind, I think I would say yeah, he's just kind of like a hanger on for Tangerine Dream. But starting with Mirage, I feel like he really does start to break away.
yeah. I mean, he seems intertwined with the fabric of that scene, so he is like, a a big character. But yeah, it takes a little bit for him to find his own unique voice, and I think to your point, yeah, from that point on, you can say he definitely, belongs in the canon. But up to that, yeah, kind of a kind of a copycat a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so next couple tracks on our playlist, through the Berlin School. The next one is "Freak and Roll" by Asherah Temple. Um, we don't have to play this one on the podcast. I'll say, like, listeners out there, check out the Join In album by Asherah Temple. If you want to hear more of like the psychedelic era of the Berlin School guys. But I put this on here because I feel like Freak and Roll is, it really shows Manuel Goetsching's, one, his chops, because this has some like really great guitar parts on it. But I think some of the repetitive nature of like the riffing on this is kind of a, a harbinger for where he's gonna go with inventions for electric guitar. Um, and I think, I don't know what would have happened if, everything that happened with Kaiser's label didn't, like, if the Kaiser's label hadn't totally fallen apart and all that kind of stuff. I don't know whether he would have continued off into like the psychedelic direction
Mm.
or not. But I think the the next track that we have, which is called Echo Waves, off of Goching's solo album Inventions for Electric Guitar, um, it's it's definitely his first attempt at something in the Berlin School style. Um, I guess like the big question for me in listening to this is he influenced by Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, and so on? This record comes out in '76, so by this time Klaus Schulze has put out Time Wind. Ricochet is out from Tangerine Dream at this point. Um, and is he influenced by that kind of stuff, or is he like thinking back towards his like electronic beat studio days and thinking about Thomas Kessler and kind of like the minimalist composers that he was exposed to, in his early days? Or is it just like a kind of like perfect storm of that kind of stuff coming together? Um, I don't know, what do you
And
think?
that's kind of where I landed. Yeah, I think he definitely shows his recent influence with the krautrock stuff and being able to manipulate the guitars into, sequence feels almost, and doing that repetitive nature. But there is plenty of the minimalist, feel to it. So you can definitely see, I think, both influences on his sleeve on it, and I think it makes for a tremendous album. For all the jam tracks and guitar looping I love to do, like I never thought to apply to it in this way. Even God, this is 50 years ago now. This is released, and look at it. I mean, yeah, huge album, probably underrated in the Guitar Hero pantheon, I would say. And yeah, that other album, the Asherah Temple album, amazing playing on that. That dude just he wails.
Yeah, he wails. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, of the Berlin School stuff, I think this is my favorite record out of those. I think like there's so many facets to it because it's like he doesn't have access to the sequencer. Kaiser's label's fallen apart. All he's got access to is a 4-track tape machine and a guitar. He wants to kind of get on this, I guess, this ride that everybody else is on with the sequencing stuff, and the performance is incredible. I mean, you got to keep in mind, like, he's not looping on any of this. These are straight 4-track performances. He's only got a 4-track, so he's playing 4 simultaneous tracks where he's like overdubbing himself, um, and I mean, I think in the whole record, you don't hear him play off by a beat the entire record. He's like
No,
he's in
it's
time with the delay. He's in time with the other tracks, and the idea that like some of the tracks are like 10 minutes long. He's playing like straight like eighth note, 16th note
right.
grooves in time in 4 tracks for 10 minutes straight. Incredible performance.
Flawlessly at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I this is kind of one of those. I think I sent the question to you, like if you could be in the studio or on the scene for like a day, where would you want to go and observe? Like, I would love to see, him just in the shop doing this. Whether it was just something as simple as like a metronome, whether the man just had like, flawless rhythm and, composition ability where he's listening to these things and overdubbing it as he is. I mean, it's not Trey Anastasio with, the boomerang looper,
Yeah, yeah.
stacking things up. This guy, 4 track, a couple little bit of effects to color things up, and that's it. It's him, himself, and he.
And the tour at this time would have been awesome as well because at this time he's touring. It's him and Lul from Agitation Free, and like I was saying before, like Lul is also has crazy chops. So the live tour for Inventions for Electric Guitar, I think it's one synth that they've got that's doing like a droning thing, and then Lul and him are playing what like the melodic parts from the record um, live. Um, I mean, that must have just been incredible to see. And
Just
you'd
any
think that like, no, go ahead.
is there any footage or media of it
Oh
that
no, I mean,
exists? Yeah,
yeah, like it just like predates the kind of like music video kind of thing. Um,
yeah.
but there's an interview in which book is it? It's by God, it's the Manuel Goching biography by Christian Wielden. There's an interview with Lowell in that where you'd think if you were going on tour with this guy, he's like your buddy
Oh,
from back in the day,
Deep Distance,
and
was that the one?
yeah, Deep Distance, yeah, yeah, that's the book. Um, you'd think you're going on tour with this guy like from back in the day. He's a bud of yours, um, and you've heard this record, and you've heard the performances. You'd be, I think, if it were me, I'd feel so much pressure to like nail the performances and knowing how hard it was anyway. And you read this interview with Lowell, and he's like, "Dude, this is like one of my favorite periods of all time. Like doing this tour with Manuel and me, we were just like shredding every date and like just like jamming, and like so he felt no pressure. Like between the two of them, their chops were so good that they just felt like they could get on stage and just like bang out these tracks like it was nothing. Um, I like
Which
that's so
is,
cool to me
yeah,
as well.
almost kind of want to hate him in a fun way. Like,
Oh
damn,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, if this is easy and kind of just you're not freaking out about this. Like, damn, I wish I had your talent, your state of mind for these things, because nothing about that sounds easy.
No, no, and like just based on like their connection to like Timothy Leary and that kind of stuff, I can't help but think they were probably doing it high too, which is
Right.
crazy.
But maybe he's remembering it differently than it actually occurred. But yeah, at least he has good memories of it.
Not true, yeah, for sure. Um, so let's play a little bit of Echo Waves from Inventions for Electric Guitar. Yeah, that last part. Oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
somebody has to play
Same
that E
thought.
part, like do 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 with the delay, and then the other guy has to go
Right.
like with
Right.
the delay in time.
I mean,
Crazy.
even down to like the percussive, guitar thing underneath it all. I mean, there's just so much clever layering in there to use the instruments kind of outside of the traditional purposes. Those lead parts. I mean, yeah, you plug those in on a synth with that kind of tone. I mean, I wouldn't be able to spot much of a difference. They nail it, and so machine like. Even though it's guitar, guitarist, human playing and everything going on, but yeah, and it always makes me think too of like Buckethead stuff. There's a couple tracks he has like that where he's really harnessing that the clean with the delay and just kind of building rhythms out of that, and just using the delay in a clever way and not just for big stadium feel. Like, let's actually use this as a tool for rhythm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, all right, let's jump one more track ahead. The next one is it's the track "Deep Distance" from Goching's record as Ashra. Like towards the end of the '70s, after his best friend, his best friend's name was he had kind of a weird name, started with an H. I think Helmut. Helmut. Let me go through my list of people. I should know this, but I know Manuel, but um, Hartmut. Hartmut Enke. Hartmut Enke was Manuel Goching's best friend growing up. He was in all of the early iterations of Ashra Temple. Um, he uh, he went a little off the rails during the Timothy Leary period, um, and decided to quit music forever. He like never came back to jam. Never even like joined up in any of like the late period Ashra Temple like reunion tours. There's a tour like way later where um, Mike Manuel Goching and Klaus Schultz play together, like either the late '70s or early '80s, and Hartmut isn't part of that either. Um, so after he leaves, and after like Kaiser's labels like crash, he does kind of re-emerge under the name Ashra, and he produces this record called Deep Distance. Or sorry, he produces a record called New Age of Earth, and the big track from that is called Deep Distance, and it's his first Berlin School record. Um, at this point, um, he has signed to a new label. He's gotten off of um, Kaiser's label, and he's gotten like a good advance. I forget if he signs to Brain or um, if he signs to Virgin. But at any rate, he gets one of those like a big advance from the new thing, and he buys a bunch of new equipment. I think he's also doing some movie soundtracks at this time as well that he's getting paid well for, and he's able to afford a synthy and some other stuff. And he really wants to produce like his first electronic album, and he, he does an amazing job. I mean, like for all of the references that like Tangerine Dream gets for Phaedra and Rubicon, and certainly like the movie soundtracking kind of folks,
Hmm.
like John Carpenter, for example, always talk about Tangerine Dream as an influence. Um, the guys that talk about Ash Ra and Manuel Goching as an influence in context of the electronic scene are all like ambient and techno and house guys are like deeply into Manuel Goching. So like you'll hear really often the Orb mention Manuel Goching as like a huge influence for him, and not just like the later record E2 E4, which is like a kind of proto minimal techno album, but he talks about New Age of Earth as well. Um, and I think there's something that Goching captures on New Age of Earth that even like Tangerine Dream and Carl Schultz and the contemporaries don't capture. There's a melodic sensibility to this record that is really unique and sounds a lot more like later New Age stuff, um, like a kind of like Suzanne Ciani kind of sound, or not. I don't want to say maybe like the melodic sensibility of Enya, but not like the kind of composition of Enya. Um, in
Sure.
a good way.
Yeah.
I know like some people might be like rolling their eyes at like an Enya record, but um, there's a yeah deep distance and New Age of Earth, great great like proto ambient record, really good production, really good melodic sensibility. Um, yeah, what were your thoughts like in the transition? Because I know like you're a big guitar guy, so like, were you still into the New Age of Earth record?
Definitely. I just went into this with an open mind that, this is still the same musician that made that guitar sound, and this is just his ideas, bore out in a different way. And no, I loved it as well. And then thinking of these albums as kind of like the birthplace of, the ambient textural music, techno, all those things, like it definitely gave it a cool place in history for me, and just thinking like, okay, if we're starting here, this is going to be a fun ride, because these aren't exactly like slouch albums at all. They're very cool. They're very very good.
Yeah. Um, I think yeah, we don't have to play this track on the podcast. We'll we'll share over the playlist. Um, and we'll kind of like zoom through the next couple of these. The next track on the playlist is E2 E4, which is both like the name of it has like some subtitles for the track, but it's basically like an hour long track that Manuel Goching released in the very early 80s, like 81. He recorded it in the late 70s as just like a jam that never got released, and then put it out later um, just because he thought it was cool. Um, and this is like very often cited as like the very first minimal techno record.
Hmm.
Um, and it, again, the Orb. I think there's I forget what the other techno producer's name is. There's another guy that like talks about this like very frequently. Oh, Carl Craig
Hmm.
is like a minimal techno producer that often talks about E2 E4 and the influence on him. And this actually ended up being like huge for Manuel Goching as well from like a financial standpoint. An early minimal techno group called Sueño Latinos. They basically sample E2 E4 on their record Sueño Latino, which is a top 10 uh, techno record like in the late 80s, early 90s, um, and is like a huge club hit at the time. So that's something that like kind of cements his place in like electronic music, really more or less. Um,
Does he get that come up and so to speak to being kind of the birth point of techno, or is it kind of everybody fighting over it a little bit? This guy did it, that guy did it. I mean, it sounds like from E2 E4, this is definitely a direct like straight line into that genre and that sound. So is he is he given his flowers?
it's hard to say, right? I mean, like when people talk about minimal techno and like the birthplace, and even Kraftwerk says this is like the birthplace of techno is Detroit, right?
Hmm.
The like early like black producers in the Detroit techno scene. Um, and I don't think that's untrue necessarily. I mean, like that like true like like bass drum driven style definitely came out of Detroit. Um, but I do think that like the fact that somebody like Sueño Latinos is sampling it, Carl Craig is referencing it, The Orb is referencing it. Um, I do think that he's recognized as like an early innovator in that style. Um, but yeah, I mean, you don't hear Florian Schneider, talking about Manuel Goching, which is kind of weird because you'd think that like they grew up in the same scene that he would have recognized that. Um, but then again, the guys from Kraftwerk were always kind of like tight-lipped anyway.
Yeah.
Um, you don't really hear Ralph or Florian talk about that kind of stuff. Certainly, like the records have like Detroit, like in some of the like live records or whatever. But um, even like Ralph and Florian in interviews very rarely talk about influences.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like it has that influence, and yeah, it's. I don't know. Walking away from this, if I'll think of him more as like that's the layering guitar guy that is just amazing, or that's the kind of grandpa of techno, so to speak. I mean, kudos to the guy. Like he reinvents himself multiple times with different sounds and
True.
musical ideas, and it's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Um, super cool dude. Yeah, yeah. And probably like the most versatile of that crew. Um, we got two more tracks for the playlist. Second to last is Michael Honig's "Departure from the Northern Wasteland." Um, this is a great Berlin School record. I think it belongs in like the pantheon of the top 10 Berlin School records, along with Ashra's New Age of Earth, along with Rubicon, Phaedra, and Klaus Schultz's Time Wind. It is a later record. It's the last of the Berlin School guys to put out a Berlin School record. Michael Honig, unfortunately for him, took a very very long time to find his feet. Um, he played as the keyboard player in Agitation Free very early on, and did the whole Middle East tour that the Agitation Free guys did. He's on the first two Agitation Free records, which are both fabulous. Though are not anything close to Berlin School. He tours with Tangerine Dream. Uh, he's on the Australian tour. There's a crazy story about Peter Baumann disappearing for the Australian tour and them having to recruit Michael Honig to go on the tour with them. Um, so he briefly is in Tangerine Dream.
They
Though
ever figure out why he disappeared or what happened there?
yes, and this is a very similar story to what happened to Michael Caroli for the Top of the Pops episode for Can. Um, he decided to go on vacation. They had some downtime before the Australian tour, and he decided to go on a trip. I think also to the Middle East. I forget if it's like Afghanistan or Iran or something. He went to like a Middle Eastern country, and it just like took him a very long time to get back. Um, he didn't anticipate what was going to happen, like with like, some of the border security kind of stuff and things like that. And he gets stuck. I think it's Afghanistan. I think he gets stuck in Afghanistan and is unable to get back in time to leave for the tour. Um, and what's crazy is like even his wife doesn't know where he is. Like he's like literally off the map.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and but yeah, he ends up
Yeah,
being totally
definitely
fine.
time
He
to recruit
enjoys.
somebody at that point. If yeah, even the missus can't find him, like yeah,
Yeah,
we better
yeah,
get on with this.
yeah, yeah. Um, and they liked him. You know, like they like Michael Honig. They're all very like complimentary of him in the book. But Peter Baumann was somebody that had been playing with him for years, and they couldn't kick him out of the band for going on vacation. Um, he collaborates with Klaus Schultz on an unreleased record called Time Wind before the actual Klaus Schultz Time Wind record comes out. Um, and then he also he helps Manuel Gosching mix down New Age of Earth. Honig has like a really nice home studio at this time, and with Kaiser's studio kind of, or with no longer having access to Dieter Dier's studio, he ends up going to Koenig's to kind of mix down the record. Um, and
So
he does
definitely a
collaborate.
player throughout the whole scene. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like everybody knows him, and he's well liked, but he never really found his footing in another band, with the exception of Agitation Free. So by the time '78 rolls around, he's like, well, I'm just gonna take a hack at this as a solo artist, and does an incredible job. There's a the he and should be mentioned. He is, so far as I know, the first person in print to coin the term Berlin School. He does it in Synapse magazine in 1978. He's doing a promotional interview with Synapse in '78, and they're asking him. They're basically telling him like, "Hey, like this record sounds like Tangerine Dream. It sounds like Jean-Michel Jarre. Do you guys have influences that would be similar, such that you would have come up with a record like
Right.
this?" And he says, "Well, I came from the Berlin School of Electronic Music." Um, and that's essentially where the genre is coined with Michael Honig in Synapse Magazine in '78. So it's a little tidbit for you if you're
Yeah.
curious.
So you mentioned
Um,
this is kind of the tail end of the movement. Um, is this like the end of the Berlin scene, so to speak? I mean, obviously there's plenty of Tangerine material that comes out after the fact. There's plenty of other artists inspired by it, but in the true traditional sense, is this kind of like the cutoff?
yeah, and it's because of what happens with Tangerine Dream, more or less. Certainly, like Klaus Schultz continues to produce Berlin style records like through his entire career. I mean, he never
Mhm.
really veers away from it. But in '78, '79, Tangerine Dream puts out their album Cyclone, which is like it's a lyrical kind of prog driven record. So it's Edgar Froese singing on it. It's I don't know if you've listened to it, Helio, but in my
I
opinion,
haven't yet. No, I'm intrigued though.
it's fairly terrible in my opinion. It is not a highlight of their catalog, um, and I think like that's the end of the Berlin School with them, because as Tangerine Dream kind of drifts away from that style, um, I think Klaus Schultz ends up being the only kind of person to stick with it, and and honestly, like as the technology gets better, people kind of take it in different directions, and I think that's a great transition to like the last song on the playlist, which is Harold Grosskopf's "So White So Gut" from his album Synthesist. Um, and I put this on here. It's never considered true Berlin School. The album Synthesis comes out in 1980. It has all the touch points of Berlin School. You know, it's got great sequenced melodies, really cool, um, like crazy sound effect stuff going on. It's largely instrumental, but what separates it is it has live drums. Harold Grosskopf was originally the drummer in a Hamburg-based band called Wallenstein, or Wallenstein, I think maybe Wallenstein, and he plays drums in all of like Dieter Dierks's studio sessions. So he's
Mm.
on like all the Cosmic Couriers records. He's on Tarot, and all that kind of stuff. Um, and when he decides to put out his solo record in 1980, um, he wants to play drums on it. You know, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and this record is, to me, like, this is a direction that Berlin School could have gone in, right? The whole record is fabulous. Like the first track is great, but it's, you know, there's a something to be said for like if you took this record and like there's another album by another like early prog band, um, from Germany. Their keyboard player, synth player. Her name is Dorothea Raux. She puts out a record as like a solo record called Deutsche Wertarbeit, which means like German quality. Um, and it's very similar in style to Harold Grosskopf's record. It's not live drums, it's a drum machine, but it's more like rhythmic. And but it has a lot of this kind of like the instrumentation and the synthesizer stuff is way more melodic and interesting than a lot of stuff that you're getting in the earlier Berlin School world. In the same way that like Harold Grosskopf's record is. Um, and it does beg the question like, why wasn't this considered like the next step for Berlin School, or why didn't anybody else go in this direction? There's only a couple records that like do this where it's like live drums and sequencing without singing. Um, and yeah, it's a bummer that nobody else went in this direction. And and I almost feel like it's because it didn't really fit into any genre, right? Like,
Right.
um, Deutsche Wertarbeit at the very least like fits into like the krautrock general school. She's doing something very similar to like what Harmonia is doing. Um, but Harold Grosskopf, I think, is just in a league of his own, playing live drums with some of the sequence stuff, which is a talent in and of itself. Like, there's a reason why
Right.
Grosskopf was the go-to studio drummer for Dieter Dierks. Um,
Yeah. If you're
but
keeping time with machines like that, then
yep.
yeah, come on in.
Um, but yeah, let's play a little bit of that of so weit so gut by Harold Grosskopf.
Yeah, you really make an interesting point about like where it could go, where it could have gone. Um, the compositions are so amazing by themselves, but yeah, if you started folding more and more stuff into it, you really could have some interesting things out there. And I wonder at times, like hearing the drums there, like my initial thought, of course, is, oh, what kind of guitar part would go on the top of this? Okay,
Oh
well
sure.
now is it too much rock? Is it too much of one thing? Because I went with so maybe that's some of the trepidation is all of a sudden, we go from this, you know, Berlin school sound to okay, I have live drums. Okay, I'm adding a guitar on it. Am I just Pink Floyd? Am I just rock and roll at this point? So I don't know. But yeah, I think there's probably a universe out there where this keeps evolving and there is a good middle ground to have a unique sound going on.
Oh, 100%. Um, yeah, I just wish some other people, picked up that Harold Grosskopf record and ran with it. Um, I feel like, unfortunately, like as you go into the '80s, stuff just gets like more and more cheesy, right? Like you've got the kind of like '80s pop sound that kind of dominates until you finally like run into post punk, and then stuff starts to kind of come back to starts being cool again, if you will. Um, that's not to say that I don't like some like 80s pop stuff, but I feel like the for whatever reason you never really hear a lot of that kind of like jammy Berlin School driven stuff later into the 80s that doesn't have like some like goofy singing. Um, and maybe there is. I mean, maybe some of the comments on the podcast will come lead me in a good
Yeah, I mean,
direction.
hey,
Go
if
ahead.
anybody out there has some something contrary to that, and can send us in the right direction, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think that covers us for the playlist. Um, I don't know. What are your other thoughts like in going through the Berlin School? Like, I know like this is pretty fresh territory for you, Helio, and that this is like um, one of your first deep dives into the genre. What thoughts came to mind as you were kind of digging in?
Very inspired um, hearing it. I think the thing I always come back to with krautrock in general is that it is so diverse, and the musicians in it are well trained, talented, and I love this early fosteраtive culture, with where people setting up, the Beat Studio and the Zodiac to encourage these guys to play, not to profit off them, not to, like School of Rock, come in and shell out your money and you're going to learn how to play somebody else's stuff. We want you to come up with original ideas and give you access to the equipment. And, one of the things I struggle with is the idea that like I wish there was more of that in the country, the world today, where it's okay, you've played. I'll take myself for instance. I've played trombone all through high school, but where was that moment of like, okay, well here's another instrument. Go bang around on it. Go play with it. Go learn. We're so eager to step in and play the stuff that's already been done, I think, in music education and in, teaching our kids instruments, that sometimes we forget that idea of how can you be original with it? What sounds can you get out of it? Where do you want to go with this? And yeah, just kind of the genre as a whole, hearing these guys with there's no real history on these instruments to compare to say like, this is how you have to sound. This is what you do with it, and what they came up with. It's just super inspiring. And all these guys went in different directions. They did find some commentary with territory with the sounds, but at the same time, tons of original ideas came out of this. How to use the sequencers, how to use the synths, how to use the studio. I mean, there's just so much to explore here.
Yeah, especially if you widen the net a little bit, knowing that like Hans Joachim Redelius and Konrad Schnitzler came out of the same Berlin scene. Schnitzler like single-handedly develops like industrial, right? He's making all these kind of like metallic, crazy sounds that eventually inspire bands like Throbbing Gristle, and noise bands like Merzbow. Um, so there, he's going very much in like the noise, music, concrete direction. You've got the melodic sensibilities of all the Berlin School guys. Um, yeah, it's a huge bummer that this kind of like music education investment isn't something that's more valued today. I mean, like in reading about the Beat Studio, and in particular, like um, some of the Thomas Kessler, like sadly, passed away, a number of years ago. But a lot of people wrote like very, very kind things about him coming out of that. And there's even like I think in Berlin, like where the old Beat Studio is, they put up like a little plaque to kind of commemorate like
Mm,
his influence on music and stuff like that. Um, and just the idea that like it wasn't even some sort of like patron, right? Like some
right.
guy that was part of like a local adult orchestra petitioned the bureau council to put money into this.
Mm-hmm.
Like the city of Berlin paid for a bunch of very cool young kids to get together and jam and develop community and learn together. And they paid the salary of a really cool guy in Thomas Kessler who exposed them to a lot of really interesting avant-garde concepts. Um, that thing just like doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Can you
And you
imagine?
look at the
Like,
tree of, things where it branches off from all those ideas and sounds that were discovered, like music would look completely different if, that whole thing hadn't happened. I mean, but here
right?
we are with looking back on, kind of these ground zero moments for these genres and yeah, okay, this is somebody taking their time just to work with, young dudes on gear.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that something like this can pop up. That somebody's inspired by that in the near future. I mean, I think the world is a little different, obviously. Like, um, but that's not to say that like, you know, the funding the arts isn't cool, and that
Right.
um,
Well, I love
somewhere like the
that.
United States
I,
couldn't do
I, I
that.
don't know if they still do this, but the Canadian government kind of fosters this a little bit,
Oh yeah.
where artists slash bands can apply for grants, so that way they can focus on like making their art as a job. And do they always make it? No, but Canada as a country says, hey, we have plenty of talented people in here. Like, let's encourage them to do this. The United States, I mean, here on January 25th, 2026, there's a number of things we could talk about. But yeah,
True.
it doesn't
True.
it doesn't seem to be a priority in that sense. It definitely, there is value in music education scene, but is it coupled with that creativity and that permission to fail and permission to make dumb sounds? No, not really. You're tested on scales. You're tested on how well you played the part, on this song. And yeah, sometimes you just need to have those moments to say like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. This is awful, but you're still encouraged to do it. You can't find anything if you don't do it.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
So I'm curious,
Well.
one of my favorite stories from all of it was
Oh please.
the Cosmic Jokers sessions. And, just kind of the like, let's bring everybody together, have a jam, uh, get them whacked out of their gourds, and then put it out. This is going to be great, right?
Yeah.
If you could have a session like that, I'll even say live or dead, what kind of musicians or who might you invite to something like that just to hear what could come out of it?
Oh my god, dude. Um, that is a great question. Uh, who would I pick? I don't want to go. I feel like there's this like way, you could go in this direction of like creating like another Yardbirds takeoff, but I just don't feel like they would go in that direction. That you would end up with like psychedelic sounds. Here's what I would do. I would take YMO, all three guys, right? Drummer in YMO, uh, Sakamoto, and Haruomi Hosono. So Haruomi Hosono on bass, uh, Sakamoto on keys, drummer. I forget the drummer's name from YMO. I'd grab Masayoshi Takanaka from like the Breeze In, Rainbow Goblins, the jazz guy, and then I'd
Oh,
grab.
hold on one second here.
Oh god, yeah.
It says our recording stopped. We're not being recorded anymore. Everyone else is still being recorded. Refresh and rejoin from a regular browser. Okay. Okay, and we're back.
Okay. Uh, where should I go back?
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay, so I'll start from. All right, so my group would be all Japanese guys. So we're going YMO. We're gonna do the drummer from YMO, Haruomi Hosono from YMO on bass, and Ryuichi Sakamoto on keys. We're gonna grab Masayoshi Takanaka of like Breeze in fame, Rainbow Goblins, um, because you got like he's got kind of like a jazz influence, but I feel like he could get psychedelic if you put him in like with Haruomi Hosono. I feel like he would get out there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then to really like set things in a bonkers direction, grab the guitar player from the band High Rise, the late '80s, early '90s, like psychedelic freakout band. I think his name is Munihiro Narita. I think he would really push them to get pretty wacky. Um, I think that's the direction I would go because you'd have a real solid like rhythm section with
Yeah.
Harunomi Hosono and the guy from the drummer from YMO, and then I think Narita would force the other guys to get pretty psychedelic. Um, I think all but Harunomi Hosono is dead now, but that would be. I think they were all around in like the early '80s. So it's a possibility for that to have happened. Um, they would have all been alive at the same time doing cool stuff. Um, yeah, that's
I
what I
got
was.
some homework
Who
though
would you
to
pick?
listen to some new names there. For me, it's funny you mentioned the Japanese thing because immediately I went to Boris and was thinking like,
Yeah. All right.
Wata, on guitar would be such a big sound, and having seen them, like, yeah, it feels like they are just up there jamming, but I mean, I know it's all very, for the most part, very well composed.
Yeah.
But the range of sounds that comes out of her guitar is just incredible. Um, I think about Dylan Carlson from Earth as well, as another
Sure.
person that I would put in there. If I wanted to have vocals, but maybe not singing, I've heard Mike Patton do some incredible just usage of his voice, his throat, his mouth, just to provide maybe it's a rhythm that he's looping, and spitting out type things. So there's probably different outside the box ways to look at that. And then I'd probably go with a guy, Zach Hill. I don't know if you're familiar with him
Oh
from
yeah.
from
Hella.
Hella and Death
Yeah.
Grips. There's nothing the man can't play. And you talk about having that solid rhythm core. If you had him back there, like he's going to read the room and go any direction they want to go, and he can pull it off. And if they want to just let him cut loose, like he's going to blow your socks off.
Oh yeah.
Another guy, having seen it, it's just kind of like this guy's not human. He's like part octopus or something like that. It's insane. Um,
Yeah. I saw him. I don't. Do you know Marnie Stern?
mhm.
Yeah. He toured with her on like her first tour with a live band. Because I think he's on her record, the first record. Like some in advance of Broken Arm, and I was like, that was the first time I'd seen him live. I hadn't seen him play with Hella prior to that, but I was like, oh my god, this guy, like, how is he achieving this?
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, it was incredible.
He, he's doing like 30-second note bass notes on one foot instead of like needing both both pedals, and it's just like, dude, this is you're a cheat code, man. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If we're playing Rock Band or Guitar Hero, you're on my side.
Oh yeah. All right, so you're
Yeah,
banning.
and
So it's
I think I need an
Wata.
organ. Yeah,
Oh, you
Wata.
need a keys guy. Yeah.
I need a keys guy. And I'm having a hard time thinking of one at the moment. For somebody bringing the question, I should have prepared a little bit more on that front.
No
Um,
worries.
yeah, but no, the one I maybe go to is like John Anderson from Yes,
Oh
just
man.
because like
Yeah.
he's going to be a completely different sound from some of those other guys in that school, and he's been through the prog, the psych stuff, so
True.
he's almost kind of the veteran there, and I think it's just kind of one of those like throw him in the room and see what happens type moments. There might be moments where he's just like, what is going on in here? This isn't a band. This isn't Yes. This isn't what I signed up for. And then there might be moments of like total synergy and breakthrough where they're making some awesome sounds. So yeah, John Anderson, Wata, Dylan Carlson, on a guitar slash bass type role, maybe handling the low end.
Yeah.
Um, Zach Hill, and then yeah, Mike Patton on Weird, or there was a Frank Zappa he would introduce sometimes. Captain Beefheart at the end of some of their shows as Captain
Oh yeah.
Beefheart on saxophone, vocals, and weirdness, and it's like, yeah, you just sometimes you need that guy up there shaking things up and making it weird.
Yeah. I think like yeah, Pow or Talk like Pink Floyd stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right,
Or
exactly,
like yeah,
exactly.
Dillinger era Patton stuff.
Yeah, there's I don't know if you've heard it. There's a bootleg. I used to have it. There was a project called Moonraker, and it was just Buckethead and Mike Patton in a live setting. And every once in a while, they'd get DJ Qbert in there, like spinning and like putting down beats. So Mike Patton might go breakdancing, or he'd come up with a little vocal melody and loop it and apply effects, and Buckethead's doing his thing, and Kubert's, doing scratch solos and beats and everything behind it. It's just like, okay, again, this
That
is what
sounds
happens when
bonkers.
you let guys just cut loose. Have fun making sound. Don't worry about making a pop hit.
Where was that? It was like
I
a
want to say New York.
New York. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in a club there. I'm gonna have to look up more and see if I can find it and send it to you, because it's one of those like, okay, this is something definitely like that needs to happen a little bit more.
I feel like there were things like that just like happened in New York. There's the when I was in college, yeah, end of college, um, there was a date in Brooklyn. I forget what the venue was called, but it was Dillinger Escape Plan was opening for Old Dirty Bastard. Um, it was a bizarre show.
Yeah,
Um,
the crowd on that's got to be a fun one.
it was very strange, um, but fun. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was. There were people that I ran into there that were like, that. I had a buddy from Pittsburgh that was going to Pittsburgh University. I was going to University of Delaware, so I had a friend that was from Brewster that had heard about the show, and he's like, "Oh, dude, we're going back to New York. We're going to see this thing." So I drove
Yeah.
up to New York with him, and then yeah, my buddy had driven him from Pittsburgh. Like, dude, I could not miss the show. That's Dillinger opening for ODB. Like, um,
How, yeah, you do not know what you're going to get out of something like that. I mean, that's just
yeah,
the recipe for fun, though. So I'm curious too. A lot of the talk with this is about some of the really cool early gear, like the Moogs and the synthesizers and the sequencers. If you had the opportunity, assuming it was in working condition, to like monkey around for a day with one of these pieces of gear, what would you want to go for? Like, some of those oscillator machines scare me, hearing how temperamental they are. But like a day, if I had a tech to set it up for me, like, okay, I could have fun with that for a day.
yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I I've had a chance to mess around with um we went to when I was like maybe in college we went to Moog Fest um down in Carolina when the Moog factory was still there. I think they've since moved it. But at the time they had like the Keith Emerson prototype thing in there.
Oh,
I
cool.
I, I messed around with that a little bit. You weren't allowed to patch it. You could just like play the keyboard. But and I've never played a real Mellotron. I have, like just in my home studio, it's called an Optigon, which is like an optical disc version of that. So rather
Okay,
than using the tapes, it uses like a proto like CD kind of thing, but it's like huge, like
cool.
laser disc size, and you put
Yeah.
it into like this little, and it has like vocal samples and other kinds of samples and stuff like that. Um, I think I think what I'd really want to mess around with is honestly like that the Moog 3P with the sequencer.
Yeah.
Um, and only because like it finds its way into like everybody's closet at some point. Florian Frick gets one in like 1969. It finds its way into the Tangerine Dream stuff. Klaus Schultz has one at some point. Like they're all messing around with it, and it doesn't really fall out of favor until way later. And also like I have like some older 70s stuff. Like I have the Octave Cat back there. It's like a
Hmm.
mid 70s monophonic synth, and it does occasionally like fall out of tuning, not like crazy, um, but I'd be really curious to see like how temperamental it really is. Now, obviously, I'm not touring with it. I'm not like taking it to Australia or doing anything crazy like
Right.
that. Um,
No
but
custom boxes built for it yet. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, but it'd be cool to mess around with that and see like how hard it really is to get like consistent performances out of it. Um, I think the other thing that's interesting about that is the early Moog stuff with the oscillators. I know that Robert Moog was very interested in being able to like overdrive the oscillator, um, and I think like those early Moog instances, there's like the oscillator that sends like the signal, but then there's like an oscillator driver that allows you to like overdrive the VCA. Um, so being able to manipulate that and getting like some of the timbres out of that, I think would be interesting.
Hmm.
I've never messed around with that or really under like I've messed around with like a Moog, like a mini Moog that has like you can push the oscillator into the VCA on the mixer hard to get
Okay.
some like overdriven saturated sounds. But I'm curious to how that worked in the Moog 3P. It could just be the exact same circuit, but
Yeah.
um, And there's another thing that like is part of the sequencing process on the old Moog 3Ps, where it's got like a sequential switch, so you can get longer sequences as a whole.
Mhm.
Um, I've never really messed around with that too much. Like I have a modular synth, um, but you know it's mostly just like oscillators, filters, and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, probably the Moog 3P. Um,
Fun.
how about you? I mean, I know you got a little studio over there.
Yeah, and I'm going to change the answer on our Dream Jam sessions because it kind of jogged my memory. I'm subbing out John Anderson. He's going to hang out on the sidelines and tag in Steven Wilson.
Oh,
Because for
Porcupine Tree.
me, yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
All right.
For me, like the first time I heard him on his Mellotron live, like I knew that was a piece of gear. Like I'm not a piano player, I'm not a keyboard player, but man, that thing is just mesmerizing. The
Oh
sounds
yeah.
it's capable of, and when you layer it in with the right instrumentation, like it is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think maybe another tangent for another time, or we could talk now.
Why not? Yeah.
The digital VST recreation of these things, like,
Oh
is
sure.
very good. It's very good, but I wonder, does it lose some of the feel and the character, having it in such a way that it's part of its charm for some of the keys to go out of tune. It's part of the charm to be able to mix and match patches on the fly. I mean, how do you feel about the digital stuff versus the really cool analog tools?
Yeah. I mean, I I'm not one of those guys that's like deep into the fidelity of it. Um, I don't get into like I mean if I just need like a choir sound and I want to like rip off a Mellotron thing, I would definitely like I have no qualms using like a VST Mellotron. I think the samples
Yeah,
sound great. I don't
yeah,
think they sound like way different than if you were to record them with like a decent microphone. Um, I think it's about like how you want to use it though. If you want to be
yeah.
inspired and you want to come up with something that's like interesting from that, like the one thing, do you know the band Anglagard?
I don't.
They're like a Swedish prog band. They came out in like the early, not early, maybe mid '90s. I think their first record came out in '96, um, and they tour with two like original M400 uh, uh, Mellotrons,
Oh wow.
um, and one of them has a uh, like a cutout in the side where the wheel that spins the tape back is exposed, so that as they're playing it, they can manipulate how fast the tape goes against the heads. Um,
Oh
and so like being able to do that kind of manipulation where you're
yeah.
like you're manipulating the tape speed and something that's which you can't really do in the digital version of the Mellotron or even in the VST. Like sure, you
Right.
could like record it and then mess with like the pitch playback and stuff in
Totally.
Ableton. But I think like that tactile performance aspect of being able to like grab the tape wheel and like slow it down or do whatever. Um, I think there's also something to be said for like I think in the VSTs now you can you can set it to like endless loop, but the
Hmm.
original Mellotron, the tape distance only went for 7 seconds. So like there was a performance aspect of that where like you couldn't hold the note for more than 7 seconds as you played it. That
Right.
really like put you into a certain like all right after 7 seconds I got to switch my note,
Yeah.
then I can come back to it. And then like the tape return function also had like a certain return time. So like you had to you had to wait until the return pulled the tape all the way back before you could get another 7 seconds out of it. Um, so I think those kinds of like limitations put you in a certain mindset that you're not going to get out of the VST. Um, and just think about like I think that brings us back to the conversation about goching um, and inventions for electric guitar, right? Like if somebody just threw a Moog 3P at him in 1974 and said like, "Go ahead, do a Tangerine Dream record," you wouldn't have gotten that, right? Like it was the limitations
Right.
of him not having money for the studio, not having access to the synthesizers that made him produce such a cool record. Um, so I think sometimes like as much as I think like from a fidelity standpoint or like sound quality, VST is fine. Don't care about it. If I
Yeah.
just want to get like that like weird like warbly tape saturated vocal choir sound, I'm totally happy to use the VST. But I think there's something to be said like if somebody handed me like a Mellotron with the side cut out, I would make a whacked out like Music Concrete record that I wouldn't be able to produce from VST.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point. I mean, the benefits, we talked earlier about like let's let these things be accessible to, to kids, to people coming into it. Like, this $99 lunch key keyboard all of a sudden can be whatever I want it to be in terms of a, creative outlet. And it's a different paintbrush every week. This week it's a Mellotron. Next week it's, some Yamaha or Korg Triton, whatever I want it to be.
Yeah.
And you can't get that in, the real world with the cost of some of these instruments. So it kind of it breaks down a little bit of the walls of that pay to play idea with music. So I appreciate it from that respect. But I think you're totally right. Like it gives you a 90%, snapshot of what the real thing will be without that option to kind of give it its own unique characteristics. Like you can tweak some of the buttons, you can change some of the settings, of course, on the digital, but yeah, you can't have the back open for tape manipulation on a computer. You're just applying another effect later on.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of just goes to like for somebody like me that just likes recording at home and playing stuff, totally fine, good enough. But if I was ever to be like an aspiring live performer, like I'd probably want something closer to the real thing.
Good luck tuning that boy.
Yeah, exactly. No thanks.
Yeah, I saw Engelgard at Nearfest in 2003, and the announcer that like introduced them was like, I just want you to know that getting the Mellotrons over here and tuning them was very difficult. So please pay very close attention to Engelgard.
Yes. The other performers, that they had a tough time too, but this one in particular, yeah.
The
Oh,
staff,
that's
it
fun.
took a very long time to tune these stupid tapes.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, so I guess, wrapping up, my
Sure.
last question to you would be like, for the beginner, like,
Yeah.
we're gonna have the playlist posted on there. Where would you go after this?
Ooh, good question.
We've
I
we've,
mean,
we've got Berlin. I mean, are there other performers that you think maybe learned from this that kind of connect a little bit? Are there other cities and regions and schools, so to think, that like, if you like this, you might not like this, but you should hear it.
oh, deep questions because I feel like you could go
Yeah.
in so many directions. Um, I feel like if you like Berlin School and you like the idea of like no drums, the kind of proto ambient thing, um, you got to go check out Brian Eno, right? Music for Airports, um, even like the Cluster Eno collaboration record, um, which I think is just called like Cluster and Eno.
Hmm.
Both of those, all that Eno stuff coming out of this. I don't know that he was like super inspired by the Berlin School necessarily, but he's very much like going in that direction. It's like no drums, um, and I think Eno had like a four-part series of like Ambient One, Ambient Two, Ambient Three, all the way
Hmm.
through Ambient Four, and he's collaborating with different people on different records. So I think like Ambient Three has influence from like Laraji, who's like a good new age
Hmm.
uh, composer. Um, I would also say like if you like new age as a style, 1,000,000% check out Suzanne Ciani's Seven Waves record, um, standout record of like new age as a genre, and it does have some like drum machine stuff in it, but it's very much a progression from Berlin School in my opinion.
Sure.
Um, I think what else is there? I mean, if this is your first podcast, like listening to us talk about krautrock stuff, if you haven't gone back and listened to, the more like the more traditional krautrock stuff from like the Dusseldorf scene, check out Neu. Neu is incredible, obviously, um, and
Kind of the one that sparked this whole tangent of ours on the show actually too. So
true,
yeah,
yeah.
gotta give the love to Noi.
Hollow Gallia is great. Can early Kraftwerk, like Ruckzuck era, Kraftwerk one. Um, if you're into krautrock in general and you want to listen to some stuff like that's like a modern interpretation of that, um, I would say Kosmischer Laufer uh, is great. It's a British guy who's pretending to be a East German. Uh, I won't do the whole backstory of this. Uh, it's it's basically a British guy that is pretending to be a German man who produced music for the Russian Olympic team in the early 70s. So Kosmischer Laufer means cosmic runner, and it's basically he produced tapes for the Russian runners to listen to while they did their workouts. Um,
Wow.
and so it has everything from like you're supposed to be able to run to them. So like it's like some of them get like faster as time goes on. So you're supposed to be like getting into your thing, and there's like even cool down music and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, so Kosmischer Läufer, it's like brand new stuff. I think his first record came out in like 2010. Obviously like modern krautrock stuff. Stereolab is like kind of like the touch point for early 90s like krautrock influence stuff. And then there's a more recent uh, Japanese band called Minami Deutsch, which means southern Germany in Japanese. Um, they are incredible. Not Berlin School in style. They're definitely like kind of more traditional uh, uh, drums, repetitive driven kind of stuff. But like I think their first record came out in like 2015 or something like that. So very much like more modern interpretation of kraut, but like very much sticking to like the krautrock genre. So I would say that that's where I would go. So if you're into ambient stuff, check out Brian Eno, the Cluster Eno record, and the Suzanne Ciani record. If you haven't heard about krautrock before and you want to check it out now, check out Noi, Can, and early Kraftwerk with the cones on the cover of the albums. And if you want
Yes.
to look for like more modern stuff, check out Kosmischer Laufer, um, Minabi Deutsch, or Stereolab.
The story, that mindset for the running music is kind of brilliant. I'm very eager to check that one out.
Yeah, the only thing that's a bummer about that is that because the dude is doing this whole shtick, he can't play live. Um,
Oh.
he tried to do it early on as a tribute player to their record, and I think he did one tour.
Mhm.
And there's like a live album of it where it's like so and so tribute to Kosmischer Laufer, but he's never toured since then. Um, and like he was touring under his like actual name, so it wasn't like there was no Kosmischer Laufer stuff tied to it. So I don't even remember seeing like posters or anything about it.
Hmm.
Um, but hopefully he can come out from behind the veil at some point and do a big tour. I would 1,000% go see Kosmischer Laufer.
Yeah, I mean, if the music's there, like, you can drop the character. We'll let it pass. Just give us the music. I think at the end of the day.
Yeah, especially now there's like 5 or 6 records out. It's like, come on, dude.
Oh yeah, he's got material. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was the first episode of Recorded on a Podcast with Better Equipment. An absolute joy to be learning and talking more krautrock with our friend Kyle Reif. Kyle, where else on the internet could we find you? I notice you have some really cool posters behind you. I've got one of yours behind me as well.
True.
Um, Let us know. Yeah, where can we find those?
Sure. If you're into ephemera, like, and you in particular want some krautrock ephemera, I run a reprint project called Reifenvater Repress. So you can check us out on Bandcamp. Just search for Reifenvater. That's my last name, Reiff, Envatter, Reifenvater. And you can find us on there. Right now we've got a cluster poster in stock as well as a Harmonia poster. So if those are two bands you're into, check it out. Um, and I'm in a band called Erie, Indiana. So not krautrock. We're more dream pop. But if you're into dream pop and more modern stuff, check that out. Also on
Awesome. Well,
Bandcamp.
if you're here listening, chances are you are open to all kinds of music. So yeah, definitely give them a listen there. Make sure to like and subscribe us. We're gonna try and have this be monthly, every couple
Yeah.
of weeks. Who knows what
Yeah.
kind of series? But there will definitely be more to come and more awesome krautrock information thrown our way. Kyle, a treat as always. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Hila. Take care.